Welcome to Gail's Kitchen. Today we're making a classic blueberry pie with a lattice top crust. We're using 4 cups of fresh blueberries and we're making a shortening crust. We're going to make a double layer pie crust. And we begin with 2½ cups of all-purpose flour. We're going to add that to a large bowl. To that, we're going to add 1 teaspoon of salt. And just stir that around just a little bit. Cut in 1 full stick of all vegetable shortening. And this needs to be cold. I keep my shortening in the refrigerator. And actually, about 15 minutes ago, I put this shortening in the freezer just to get it a little colder. So the secret to making a pie crust is that everything needs to be cold. So go ahead and just slice through that block both horizontally in both directions. And then I just cut it into small pieces. I like to go ahead and use my fingers and lightly toss that shortening. Take my fingers and just start taking the big pieces and mashing them. You can certainly do this with your pastry blender. You can cut the shortening in with 2 forks. You can add all of these ingredients to a food processor and pulse it a few times. I just prefer getting my fingers in the dough. I just love making dough, and I love pie crust. What we want to do is cut this in until we get all of that Crisco covered, and we have pea-sized pieces, just a few bigger pieces. And it's okay to have different size pieces. That's good enough. We have varying sizes, and we don't want to work it too long because we want everything to stay cold. The crust needs everything to be cold. And that is especially true after we've cut in our shortening. We want ice cold water. So I put ½ cup of water in my measuring cup and I added ice to it and I let this sit. So now it's melted a little and we've got about 3/4 of a cup, which we may need to use a little more than ½ cup. We'll see how it goes. But you just drizzle a little bit of this cold water over your crust. And now toss it. I'm going to drizzle a little bit more over here. It took me years to figure out how to make the perfect pie crust. And I tell so many people, many a dough ball went against the wall. And I'm not kidding, because I just could not get my crust to work for anything. And, you know, back in the day, before YouTube, we didn't get all these little secrets and videos of how to make things work. So, trial and error. But I learned that everything needs to be cold. You can even take your flour and measure it out ahead of time. Stick the bowl in the refrigerator for 15 or 20 minutes before you begin to make your crust. But if you've had trouble making a crust, it's most likely because the ingredients are not cold. Make this into a ball. Now, if you have a difficult time getting your crust to come together, it may be that you need to drizzle just a little more water. Okay, so we have enough water. We're just going to kind of mash this together. So now what I'm going to do is just cut this in half because we're going to have a bottom and a top layer. And it doesn't have to be exact. We're trying to shape this into a disc. So you're just going to put it between your hands and mash it out and use your thumb to keep it round on the outside edge. and we'll just do the same thing for crust number 2. So we have our second disc. I'm going to wrap these in cling wrap, and we're going to place them in the refrigerator for a minimum of a half an hour. I personally like to make my crust the day ahead and let them sit in the refrigerator overnight. So we'll be back to make our blueberry pie as soon as our crusts are cool. So let's make the filling for our blueberry pie. You start out with 4 cups of blueberries, and you're going to wash them obviously and let them drain. You don't really want any extra liquid in the pie, so let them drain well. I'm going to add 3/4 cup of sugar. And I just go ahead and toss my berries with the sugar. 2 teaspoons of lemon juice. And fresh squeezed is always so much better than the juice out of a jar. So 2 teaspoons. Using a 1/4 cup of flour as my thickener. Just sprinkle that on there. If you want to use cornstarch, you would use half as much. Some people use tapioca. It doesn't matter which thickener you use. I just always have flour on hand, so I choose to use the flour. And I like to add a 1/4 teaspoon of cinnamon to my blueberry pie. This is optional. It just gives it just a hint of some spice. Toss this to combine it. Once this pie starts cooking, everything's going to blend together very nicely. So that's what our filling looks like. All we have to do now is pour it into our bottom crust. We're going to roll out our bottom crust 2 inches greater than the size of your pie plate. I'm using a 10-inch pie pan today. You can use a 9-inch. It's just going to be filled a little thicker with the blueberries. If you made your pie crust in advance and it's been in the refrigerator overnight, you want to bring it out of the refrigerator for about 15 minutes before you're going to roll it. So cover each side with a little flour. Grab our rolling pin and cover this. So you're going to flour your surface, and I just go ahead and push that crust out just a little bit. You want to start from the center and roll out, crust out to the edges, and then just turn it. If you've got this nice little handy template, that makes it a little easier. So I'm going to flour this just a little more before we roll this crust up and transfer it. You want to get that rolling pin in the very center of your crust and just start rolling. And I sprinkle just a little more flour on the bottom of my crust. There. And if you put a little of the flour on the outside of it as you're rolling it, it makes it a little easier if you need to shimmy it around in there. So just lay it down in there. And one thing with keeping your crust flaky, you really don't want to handle it too much. So that fits in there perfectly. I'm going to roll out crust number 2, the top crust. And we're going to make this into a lattice top today. With your top crust, you're going to also roll that out 2 inches greater than the size of your pie pan. So I'm using the 10-inch pie pan today. I'm rolling this out to 12. If you don't want to do the lattice crust, you can roll it out and then, of course, transfer it on top and then crimp it and make some slits in the top. Or you can take a cookie cutter and make some cutouts. However you want to make your top crust. So we're going to do the lattice. You can use a pie wheel, you can use a pizza wheel. You're just going to want to flour that as well. Just coat it in a little flour. We're going to need 9 strips. Make them about 1 inch wide. And you do can measure them if you want. I just do it by sight. But you're going to have to keep dipping that roller or your pizza wheel in the flour. We have our top crust cut into lattice pieces. We have our pie pan ready with the bottom crust. And we're going to pour the blueberry filling in. One thing that I like to do before the filling goes in, I take about a half a tablespoon of butter, and this is room temperature butter, so it's soft. And I go ahead and coat my pie crust. The reason I do this is it creates a barrier between the crust and the filling, and that just helps the crust, the bottom crust, to cook better. I'm going to toss our filling one more time. And you see right now, it's a lot of berries and not much liquid, but there's a lot of liquid in the berries, so it's important that we have you know, the thickener in there. It's important that you put that thickener in there when you're making a fruit pie. So this is going to fill this 10-inch perfectly. We're going to take 2 tablespoons of butter, and we're going to, I cut them in half, and I just lay them around in pats on the top, and that's going to melt through there and make it nice and tasty. Let's put the lattice top on. So you have we have these beautiful strips that we made, and we're going to put 5 strips across here. So don't worry about how the outside edge looks right now. And I did not make these very uniform, but it doesn't matter. It's how it tastes is what matters to me. We just laid 5 strips across there, and now we're going to weave them. So, we're going to take 4 strips, and we're going to come in here and pull this one and this one back ever so gently, and we're going to lay this here and go back and put these back in place. So there you see. So we moved these 2. Now we're going to move the other 3 that we did not move the first time. Move this back, and this one back, and this one back. And now let's lay in another strip, and then just put these back in place. There we go. So now we go back to the first 2 strips and pull them back, and grab us another piece and lay that across there, and lay these 2 back. Now we go for the last 3, and we're going to put one more strip on here. And lay them back. Lay the 3 back. So there we have our lattice weave. And now we're going to crimp the crust. We're going to fold the bottom crust on top. In some places I may not have enough, so I'm just going to pinch it to form one. And this is where I fix my crust. If I don't have enough, because it doesn't always work out perfectly, I can take some of this extra and fold over there and just kind of make a bigger edge if I want. just kind of push them together as one. If you want, you can make your pie crust another inch larger and then fold the outside crust over on top of the lattice pieces. So on this outside edge, don't be afraid to be a little firm with it and squeeze it together. If the piece doesn't want to stick, put a little water on it and it will stay in place. I take my index and thumb finger, and then I take my middle finger of the other hand and I just push on it like that, go around. So you see how I'm doing this. Our pie is going to be so delicious. One last step to make the crust a little shinier. I'm going to brush it with some half and half. You can use an egg wash. You could use an egg wash with egg white and maybe swirl together with a little water. You don't have to do this. It's just makes it just a little shinier. After making the lattice top, I like to do the one little extra step just to make it even more special. You could sprinkle some sugar on top if you wanted to. I'm going to go ahead and put this in the oven. It's going to bake at 425 for 45 to 55 minutes. To prevent the edges from burning, I'm going to go ahead and start cooking it with some tinfoil wrapped around the edges. I went ahead and cut several pieces of foil and sprinkled them because I want to just lay them very gently on here so it doesn't over brown because it's got to cook a good while. I prefer the tinfoil. I have the pie crust covers, but I just think the tinfoil looks a little better for me. It prevents your crust, after you did all that crimping, it prevents the crust from getting flattened. Our blueberry pie cooked for 50 minutes at 425 degrees. For the first 20 minutes, I cooked it on the center rack. It was cooking fairly quickly, so I moved it to the second from the bottom rack for the last 30 minutes. I covered the outside edges for the first 25 minutes with foil. Now our pie is completely cool. We can slice into it. Add a dollop of whipped cream or eat it plain.